Hi, I'm Nick Rains from Leica Camera Australia. You're probably much more familiar with seeing me sitting at a desk in the studio, but this time I thought I would do my first look at the Leica D-Lux 8 on location in Greenland, where I'm doing some work. So what is it about this camera which I really enjoy? Well, first of all, it's a really compact size. I mean, I've got a dry bag here. I can put the camera into the dry bag and pull it out if the conditions are difficult, if it was raining or something. Very, very convenient. 16 megapixel capture, which is more than enough for most purposes. 24 to 75 millimeter lens, which gives you enough width for a big vista shot, but enough telephoto pull for some more detailed pictures and portraits and so on. So very, very versatile. All metal construction, feels very solid in your hands, gives you confidence. The electronic viewfinder is a joy to use. So all in all, it's just a really neat little package. So I've been shooting some pictures. I'm going to show those pictures to you now. I'll go through them one at a time, tell you a few things about what features of the camera helped me get that shot, and at the end I will give you a bit of a summary about where I think this camera fits within the Leica range. So I'm back in my cabin on board the ship, this beautiful icebreaker, and I thought I'd show you some of the pictures I've shot in the last couple of weeks. Now, my travels started in Iceland and I was just there for a couple of days, just sightseeing. Blue sky day, no particular serious intent with my photography, but I took the D-Lux 8 along anyway just to see what it was capable of. And I went to a place called Gullfoss, which is this picture here, and again, blue sky day, you're not going to get any good light. I didn't have a huge amount of time. These are just pictures for me just to remind me what it looks like, but it does illustrate one point. This is the place that you can see this massive waterfall falling into a huge trench at the bottom of the screen. There's a nice little rainbow there, lots of people around. But I wanted to show you how well it's handled the tonal range, because that water is really bright under full sunshine, and yet the dark basaltic rock is really black. And it's still managed to keep a really good distinction between the two. We don't have any blown out highlights, we don't have any blocked up shadows, and if you look at the histogram in the top right hand corner, it's just about spot on. So that's really impressive. The sensor is doing a great job in capturing a very, very wide tonal range. Let's move on to some Greenland pictures here, because we moved across from Iceland northwest to the Greenland coast, and after a couple of days sailing we hit the sea ice, and I just started taking some record pictures on the D-Lux 8 just for my fun, really, and starting off with some of the sea ice that we met. It's in the mist. It was really misty when we were there the first couple of days. Looking for colours, you get this wonderful blue colour through the water. This is just looking out of my cabin window, and then they started to assemble our onboard helicopter, and this is a good example of just how sharp this camera can be. This is taken about middle of the range through the zoom, so about 50mm equivalent, and if I zoom in on this myself, you should be able to see, hopefully in the video, how crisp this is. Every single rivet is showing out beautifully. There's a good tonal range from the highlights on the fuselage of the helicopter through to the black instrument panel inside the helicopter itself. So very, very impressive. And again, if you look at that histogram in the top right hand corner, you'll see it's absolutely nailed that exposure. Then, using the 24mm end of the lens range, we can capture these expanses of ice and snow we managed to get off the ship. There's one little tiny figure here. This is one of the expedition staff with a rifle to protect us from polar bears, and we'll come back to polar bears in a sec, because they are not to be taken lightly. Using the wide-angle lens, we can get a nice expansive view of the ship as well. This is Le Commandant Charcot, one of the few icebreakers that you can go on as a passenger on a beautiful blue sky day. We were super lucky with the weather, which was great. Close-ups, good for close-ups. This is the snowshoes, not my feet, it's one of the other passengers' feet, but it gives you an idea of how crunchy that snow is, and the texture in those highlights is superb. If I just zoom into the middle here, you'll see how really beautifully it's kept the texture of those highlights, which is quite difficult for some cameras to capture. You really want to make sure those highlights are not overexposed. We were also met by a Danish naval vessel, and the idea was to do some exercises between the two ships. They were going to send over a fire crew to put out a fire on board our ship as a drill, of course, but their big helicopter wasn't able to land on our helicopter pad because it was too heavy. So we had to do some rather interesting maneuvers whereby they dropped their crew onto our ship by winch, and we had a lovely time watching this helicopter moving backwards and forwards between the two ships and winching their crew onto our foredeck. Really quite exciting. So this is the 75mm end of the lens range, so getting a bit tighter, and then moving a bit closer, and this is the 24mm end of the lens range. Two pictures of much the same thing, two very different perspectives. This is the 24mm end of the range, so great for scenic views and wide expansive landscapes like this. And then you can zoom in and compress that perspective using the 75mm end of the lens range. Then we met these guys. This is why we have our expedition staff with rifles, because these are quite dangerous if you met them on the ice. And in fact, if we spot a bear, everybody has to come back off the ice onto the ship because we don't want anything unpleasant to happen. We came across some bears. This is taken on the D-Lux 8, of course, the 75mm end of the range. And again, you can see how beautifully it's captured the highlights as well as the detail in the bear. This one I really enjoyed because it shows some of the blue ice and it shows the animal in context, hopping across between the ice floes. And speaking of hopping across, the camera's very responsive. The shutter button is really good. It has a very small lag and you can time shots quite nicely. So when this bear decided to hop across to the next ice floe, I was able to capture the shot very, very easily. All right, so that's some pictures from Greenland. I also want to show you some pictures that I took back in Australia before I left, because there is one feature of this camera which I haven't mentioned, and it's not been necessarily relevant for this trip, but the camera itself has a tiny little flash which you can attach to the top of the camera. Now you may wonder, well, what's so exciting about that? Well, the thing is, the lens has a leaf shutter inside it, not the normal focal plane shutter, but a leaf shutter. That means that the flash synchronization speed is any shutter speed. It's not limited to 125th or 250th like most cameras are. So you can do all sorts of fill flash effects. And I did do some pictures with a model in Melbourne before I left on my trip, and a couple of these show it up really well. It's supposed to be really subtle. So this is just the model in a stairwell, and that's with no flash. And then when I put the flash on, can you just see how it lifts the shadows and makes the picture just look more organized, more tonally organized. It works really well. Here's another one. This is window light with no flash, and then with the flash you can see the little tiny pinprick in her eye just fills in the shadows on the right hand side of her face. Now, on camera flash is not ideal. As I'm sure you realise, it's better if it's off camera, but in those circumstances where you want just a little bit of fill, it can be an absolute game changer, and you don't have to worry about using it in full sunlight because you can use any shutter speed. Here's another example. I think this one makes the point very well. This is using window light, and then this is with the fill, and I think you'll agree it looks that little bit more smoother, and there's no real sense that flash has been used in this picture. So going back to the no flash one, and then to the flash one. That looks pretty good to me. The other thing you can do, of course, is to shoot pictures at night and capture movement. And I went to a fun fair in Toowoomba in Queensland, and I got some pictures like this. So this is the flash freezing the picture at the same time as the ambient light is being blurred because it's a slow shutter speed. So the slow shutter speed gives you the blurry effect, but the flash itself gives you a burst of light that's very short and it freezes the movement. And I had a bit of fun with this, just turning the camera with the movement, firing the flash off, letting the camera do all the work for me. So it worked out really well. So it's another string to its bow. So the D-Lux 8 is a very, very capable camera. The 16 megapixels was capable of doing maybe not quite as big as the print behind me, but certainly an A2 print without any trouble at all. The lens is really sharp, it's very responsive, it feels beautiful in your hand. It's been a real asset to have it with me on this trip. So where does the Leica D-Lux 8 fit into the range? Well, think of it as an introduction to the Leica ecosystem. One of the features of the D-Lux 8 is that the menu system is almost identical to the other cameras in the range, so the Q3, the SL3, M11. It's obvious that those menus have been designed with consistency in mind. So if you get familiar with the Leica D-Lux 8, you'll feel immediately at home with an M11 or an SL3. So that step across to the other cameras will be effortless. So you get a whole sense of the way the Leica DNA has been set up, and you get a real sense of the quality and the thought that's gone into these cameras. So it fits as a very, very nice entry level into that Leica world. So have a look at one in the store, pick it up, have a feel. I think you'll be very happy with that, and then shoot some pictures and I guarantee you won't be disappointed.